Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? Hopefully you can. So when the suggestion was that I actually gave this talk, I actually thought that title would be clever and funny, and I realise now it's not, so I apologise. But unfortunately I'm stuck with it because it's in your programme. So what I'm going to talk to you about is the kind of transition from having spent 14 years in further education and then 14 years in higher education and moving to a completely different sector that I had very little knowledge about, and what that's been like. And when I first set out to do this talk, I had ideas about what I was going to tell you about, and I thought I'd be telling you amusing stories about how USB sticks are the work of the devil, and that we're not allowed them. And in fact, if my head of governance saw me holding one and he was watching the live stream, he would probably faint dead away. And I thought I'd be able to tell you funny stories, like the fact that I have a desk so big and so Victorian that I can never swap it out of my office. And I'm assuming that means they built the building around my desk, which I think is quite impressive. But actually, as the months have gone, I've realised I wanted to talk to you about something quite different instead. So, okay. I'll start by saying the second most common question I get asked by people who know that I've changed sector, whether that's local government people talking to me about why have you joined us, because you're a bit weird, because you're from a different sector, why have you come? Or yourselves going, you're a bit weird, why have you swapped? Is I was really interested in whether the job of a CIO or the senior IT leader, whatever we call ourselves, is the same. So can you pick someone up with their skills, their experience, their capabilities from one organisation, one sector, and can you transplant them into another one and then still be successful? And on a personal level, I wanted to know, could I do it? Could I hack it? Would I be able to make it in local government? And as you can appreciate, that's a bit of a gamble. So I've gambled with my entire career. That sounds sensible, doesn't it? And if any of you want to ever talk to me about all the things I put in place as kind of safety nets to give me a level of comfort so I could sleep at night, I'd be very happy to do that, but I'm not going to do that now. The picture is my office. Not literally my office, because that would be a bit grandiose, wouldn't it? But my office is in that building. So I've moved from a very modern office building where I had very modern furniture and I had colour on the walls as well. It was very nice. And I now work in a Grade 1 listed building. It's the only Grade 1 listed building in the centre of Sheffield, and it's beautiful. And it's a privilege to work there. It's not a pleasure, but it is a privilege. It's a Victorian building where the heating has two settings. One is Arctic. That's quite common in winter. And one is the centre of the sun, and that's summer. So that's excellent. So I love that. Oh, I should have said, by the way, there's no branding on these slides. That's because these are my opinions. This has not been vetted by either my old employer or indeed my new one. So please bear that in mind. So what I thought I would come and talk to you about is my assumptions. So before I started, I had lots of assumptions about local government. I have to say, not a lot of experience of it, but lots of assumptions. And I assumed things would be quite different. However, what I found were that actually things were very, very similar. And that was quite a surprise. And in some cases, it only took a couple of weeks to find that out. And I was very surprised at how much was similar. And some of that was reassuring, and some of it wasn't. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is what I've learned from that. So I've been in the post about 7 months. And there's certainly no lack of challenge. So I've learned that. There's lots of things to do. And there's a definite need for talent, and that's one of the things I want to focus on at the end. So, in terms of what I expected, in terms of HE, so these were things that I felt were characteristics of working as a CIO in an HE institution that I wouldn't see in local government. So the first thing was, one of the things I loved about working in a university was that opportunity to just do things that were not directly part of my role. So you have an opportunity to get involved in some really interesting things, some quite odd things, some quite insane things sometimes, and it's fab. So if you're up for it, you can do it, you get those opportunities. And I thought, local government's not going to be like that. I'll be much more within my area, within my subject domain, and that's where I'll be expected to work. In terms of HE, I assumed that local government would just be in advance of HE in terms of systems and processes. So I assumed that HE, because of its nature, would be less mature on that side. And because I'm used to UCISA, and the informal relationships around the sector. I knew that HE has a really strong culture of sharing, collaboration and supporting one another. We don't really feel like we compete with one another, do we? And UCISA is a great example of that. And I didn't think the same thing really existed in local government. So in terms of local government, I assumed that they would be much more commercially driven, partly because of where they've had to come from since austerity's really hit. I thought they'd be much more managed, so I thought, yes, no more of that non-compliance stuff. That'll be good. That'll be much, much easier. I thought we'd be fantastic at contracts management. The authority I work in has a significant amount of outsourcing, so clearly we're going to be really good at contracts management. That's going to be a really good learning piece for me, because I've not done an awful lot of that kind of contract management at that level, so that would be great. And I did assume it'd be much more insular and there'd be a lot less sharing. So that's what I started out with. And when I look at those, I'm actually quite ashamed, to be honest, because they're really patronising and they're not at all true either. So what I found, another picture. So has anyone seen Testament of Youth that's just been released? Nobody seen it? One person's seen it. Okay, so if anyone would like to go at some point and look for stills from the film, so it was released at the end of last year, you may recognise this corridor. So this is part of the non-public area of the town hall, and the door right at the bottom is an outer office, and off that office is my office and the Director of Legal and Member Services. But this corridor, if you can just picture it, with double row of metal World War I beds, was used in that particular film as a hospital. So I work in somewhere that has that kind of vibe to it, and it's really nice. So, what I found, appreciation of commercial issues, really, really different across the institution. So I've had conversations with people, even quite senior people, where they've said, as part of discussing contracts, they've said, oh, but our supplier makes a profit from what we do. And I've gone, yeah, I know, because they're a commercial organisation. They've gone, but it's not right, they shouldn't do that. And it's really interesting that they struggle with the concept that the things that we've put out with a third party are things that either we can't do as cheaply as they can do, or we can't do as well as they can do, because that's why it's with them. Because if we could do it as well and cheaper, we'd do it ourselves, wouldn't we? So the fact that they can do that and make a profit is actually quite impressive. But they really struggle with that. And that's quite interesting when you have long discussions with them about why they're unhappy about the amount that a certain supplier charges for something, because they really, really get upset about that profit margin. And our contracts are actually explicit about what the overhead is. They actually tell us what their overhead is, so everybody can see it and go, I don't want to pay that. So that's quite interesting. The other thing I found was that, and this surprised me, was our systems and processes are actually not much more mature. It's actually very similar to the university that I came from, which means there's an awful lot still to do. And when you think that they've been through years and years of austerity and they've cut loads and loads of money out of the budgets, the fact that they still have such a lot of work to do on some of that thing, I think is fascinating. But it does mean that there's a lot to go at. And the use of some things are really far behind where I would have expected. And business intelligence is one big one that I would pick. So it's not just in Sheffield either. It is an issue for Sheffield. But actually it's an issue for most local government authorities that I've spoken to. Business intelligence is something everybody knows they need to do. I'm not really sure always what it is, but they know they need to do it. But they don't really know how to get started on it, and most of them have not made much progress. So there are one or two stars in that. So Barnet get quoted as a lot, as an exemplar for things that they've done, particularly as they were using the same supplier as we use. So it's our supplier that keeps telling us how fabulous Barnet is. And Sunderland is another council that I would pick out who've done something really innovative with business intelligence, in that they've worked with a third-party provider who've come in a matter of months, actually gone from no capability to something that's really fantastic, that's really visual and really rich, and is allowing them to make really intelligent decisions. And I could bore you senseless about graffiti and dog dirt collection and things like that. All the fun that I get now in local government. And I can tell you all about that, but you'll have to do that over coffee probably. And non-compliance is an issue. I don't think it would be. But actually, mandatory means optional still, just like it does for you. So that's fun. And there is plenty of sector collaboration and sharing. You tend to have to know where to look for it, or you tend to have to go generate it yourself. But if you go out there and you talk to people, people share, just like you all share. People collaborate. So I mentioned Sunderland. I asked one of our suppliers to give me the kind of like top 3 CIOs, local government, that they thought I should go talk to if I was looking for people who would be really, really good. And the lady at Sunderland, a lady called Liz, was one of those people, and she's really excellent. So I've gone and talked to her. She loves sharing what she's done because she's so proud of it. And actually, she's just about to go through a big outsourcing of her IT contract. So I'm reciprocating by talking to her about what I've been doing about the renewal of our IT outsourcing contract. So there is collaboration. You can make it happen. It's not as mature, I would say, personally, as it is in your sector. Notice I said your sector. So, okay, and the last one, which was a wonderful surprise, was the fact there's loads of opportunities to work outside your own domain. In fact, too many opportunities to work outside your own domain. It's fantastic. If you want to do it, certainly for me, I have a brilliant boss. I've got to say that because he's threatened to watch the stream. I've got a brilliant boss, and he will give me opportunities to do lots and lots of things if I want to do it, or he thinks I should do it. However, the one thing I hate is rules, and I've said rules, because what you find is that someone will say, oh, you can't do that. There's a rule that says you can't. And you go, really? And they go, yeah, it's Cabinet Office guidance. Got to go follow it. So, because I'm me, and I came from HE, I go to the Cabinet Office website and I look at it and I'll find that actually it's in a document marked guidance. Now, I thought guidance meant it wasn't a rule. I thought it was just supposed to help you make a decision. So I'll go back and I'll go, it's not a rule, it's fine, it's guidance. And then they'll go, no, but you haven't looked at this second document. And this second document, also from the Cabinet Office, says, by the way, that guidance that we told you about is a rule. You have to adhere to it. So that's useful. It also changes regularly. So there are still colleagues in local government that are using Cabinet Office guidance that is a couple of years out of date that says you cannot use cloud providers if their data is outside the UK. So they go, can't use Amazon, can't use Microsoft, can't use Google, because they hold data in Ireland or somewhere else in the EU. And actually they haven't realised that the guidance on that has moved on. Guidance, rules, has moved on. So actually it doesn't say that anymore, but you've got to keep track of it. And there's no one prompting you that it's changed. What I also found, and I'll whistle through these a bit faster, there's loads of stuff that local government does that isn't about direct service delivery. Now, if you think about the amount of money that's gone out of local government, we are having to do so much that isn't about stuff that makes a difference to people's lives. Now, I've got to be careful about what I say here, because I can't be seen to criticise it, but there does seem to be an awful lot of effort, a lot of staff time, a lot of officer time going into things that we have to do, and you have to question how much difference it actually makes. And a lot of that is around scrutiny and transparency. Now, they're good things. You know, local authorities are held to democratic accountability. We have elected members that make sure we're making the right decisions, and that's all good. But you can see a kind of layering of things happening. As an incident happened some years ago, there's kind of a new process put in place where we have to write a report on the number of annual complaints we've had about X. And then we'll do another one and it's about Y. And then we'll do another one and it's about B. And you can just see all these layerings of things that we're having to do, and people, you know, can't really challenge it. But there's an awful lot of work goes into that. And I've also got an example where, as part of budget setting, so the budget is a big deal for local authorities, and you have to have a balanced budget. It's got a huge political process wrapped around it, as you would appreciate, because, you know, this is a vote winner, vote loser kind of thing, particularly this year. So there's an awful lot of work goes into, we need to balance the budget, it costs this much to deliver services, how are we going to be able to do that? So we have long discussions about, well, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this one, and then we say, oh, we're going to do this. Now, I would have said in HE that you then went out and told people, we've decided to do this is why we think it's the right thing, this is what the impact of it will be, and this is how it's going to deliver what we need. What I was slightly shocked about, and I actually did challenge it in the meeting, and I went, you're not really going to do that, are you? But they have to, is they have to also talk about all the other things that they considered. And they have to make that public too. So if you can imagine that you think the unthinkable, because you are really getting down to the bone now in local government in terms of the cuts. So you're now going out to people and saying, we've considered sacking you, but we decided not to. That's okay. We've decided to do this other thing as well instead. So you're safe this year. That's going to do wonders, isn't it, for staff morale? And I was just so surprised we had to do that. But what we have to do is actually show the kind of full life cycle of the decision making, which makes sense, doesn't it, that you would have to do that. But there's kind of a consequence to doing that that I found quite surprising. So I've talked about cuts, hundreds of millions of pounds of cuts. I can't think of a university, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I can't think of a university that's had to do that year on year and still going. It means that working practices have changed, regardless of the rhetoric you hear about local government. The rhetoric makes me angry, you might be able to tell. So the other thing I've learned about is elected members. So elected members, otherwise known as councillors. I'm not quite sure why we call them two different things, but they are elected members, and one of the things I've learned quite recently actually, and that is what they have to deal with. So we had a full open council meeting recently, and my cabinet member, and I won't explain that because it's not that exciting, but my cabinet member had been asked a question, so he got it in advance, very, very, very long detailed question, and it was sent to officers to provide briefings to him on what he would answer to it, because it was very, very operational and detailed. And frankly, you look at it and you go, oh my God, is that what they've got to deal with? You get a new sympathy for them, and actually, I'm not quite sure why anybody would want to be an elected member, just the amount of grief that they get. So the other thing I've learned about them as well is how we work with them. So we don't have managers and workers, we have elected members and we have officers. Similar kind of distinction though. And elected members will get involved in decision making depending on a number of things. So the value of the decision being made seems reasonable. The link to anything kind of political or reputational or anything like that. The kind of person they are, their personal interests, how much they trust you, how much credibility you have with them, what point you are in the electoral cycle. So we're obviously about to go to an election. That's quite interesting. So decision making is already convoluted and complex, in my opinion. This layers something else on top. And ultimately, you can make an officer decision, and it can be a business decision, and elected members can overrule you. And you just have to accept that. The best you can do is try to convince them, to work to influence them, to explain why you've made the decision you've made, but ultimately they carry the can for it, so they can overrule what you say, which is very interesting. And I had an example of having to work with elected members on a particular decision that they wanted to go one way and officer advice was a different way, probably about 3 weeks in. And it wasn't actually in my area, but I was actually having to go and put the business case across to them about why what they wanted to do wasn't the right thing to do. And in the end, because we have a good relationship with our elected members, that worked. But you can imagine that that can quite polarise the relationship. Okay, breadth of what the local authority does, it's huge. I was told on Monday that we have 34 services, and I thought, oh, is that all? But when you think children's services is one of those services. 34 services are massive. And it's also very important in what it delivers. So, you know, these are things that do affect people's lives. They are life and death decisions. Not everything. You know, your bin collection's probably not going to cause a death immediately, but some of the other things we do is. And the other thing I've learned is nobody likes their local council, and nobody likes anybody who works for their local council. This has been marvellous to find out. So a couple of weeks before I joined the council, I went to some meetings on their behalf, but had to introduce myself as, hello, I'm Aline, currently work at Sheffield Hallam. Hi, Aline. Hi. But I'm just about to move to Sheffield Council. Really? I actually did say that I wanted a red lightsaber, because I had obviously joined the CIS. And you do get treated like that. You go into meetings, and I'm not talking about with just members of the public, I'm talking about decision makers in other organisations who just see the local authority as this big, bureaucratic, horrible thing that intervenes and stops things happening, so nobody likes us, which is interesting. So some things are different. So IT. In HE, Wi-Fi. We had, in Hallam, we have Wi-Fi across campus. U5 staff and students, you can use your own devices, that's fine. BYOD, it's fine. Everybody's happy with BYOD. Well, not everybody, but Hallam is. It doesn't really matter whether we are or not, because people do it, whether we like it or not. So we just have to find ways to enable that in a way that's safe, and I'm sure you're all doing the same thing. And please, please, next time you see Tim Kidd, give him a hug, because... and that's not just because he's promised to be my cheerleader. Thank you. But because you have got such a fantastic resource with Janet. When I worked in HE, I thought, yeah, Janet's good, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. Now, I see how good Janet really is. It is fantastic. So the two things I would pick out from that, one is Eduroam. I can't understand any HE organisation that hasn't enabled Eduroam. I know there are some. I just don't understand why you wouldn't. Eduroam is fabulous, and you all take it for granted. And it's very much an enabling service. So they don't talk to you about what you can't do. They talk to you about how they can help you do what you need to do, obviously within the rules of engagement with it. Janet's fabulous. In local government, we do have Wi-Fi. Sheffield City Council has excellent Wi-Fi. I can use it. I can use it for my council-provided managed device only. I can't use it for my work iPhone, though. So I sit in my office with brilliant Wi-Fi using 4G on my iPhone, because I'm not allowed to connect my phone. If one of you comes to visit me, and you may do, you know, I'd love to see you. If you come to visit me, I can give you a passcode for the day, or for a month, and you can bring whatever device you like, and you can connect it to my network. But I can't. Not quite sure why. That's one of the questions I'm currently asking. Could you explain to me why? That's a bit odd. BYOD, the bit that's missing on here was, on the HE side, it was a big smiley face. And on the local government one, it was a kind of Munch's screen. So a few weeks ago, I was in a conference in Birmingham, a local government conference in Birmingham. It was actually a Microsoft event. And there was a BYOD session, and people there were saying, don't want BYOD, it's terrible. There's no way we're ever going to allow it. And it was kind of like, well, really? Because people are bringing their own devices. Why would you not want to? Why would you not see that as part of your potential future delivery? But people hate it. One very large local authority in the north of England rolled out BYOD and had to roll it back again. Can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine rolling out a service and then about 6 weeks later having to go, really sorry, we're going to roll it back? And they had to do, because they were told that they were going to be non-compliant with their equivalent to Janet. And if they didn't roll it back and they remained non-compliant, they would be cut off that network. So it would be the equivalent of being told, right, you're off Janet now. So they had to roll that entire service back. Really embarrassing, because they'd rolled it out to elected members who were relying on it, you know, all their staff, all their users, everything. And they just had to kill the entire service. And everybody's terrified now. It's like, God, not doing BYOD. So connectivity. I've got public sector network. It's lovely. It was invented on the basis that we wanted to be able to do something a bit like Janet. So link all the local authorities together, enable much more collaborative working, sharing of resources, enabling shared services, things like that. Not seeing a lot of that. Waiting for roaming. So I managed to get a contact with the lead from the Yorkshire and Humber provider for PSN. I said, go on, why haven't you got Eduroam? Why haven't you got something like Eduroam? It's obvious that you need it. And he said, yeah, I agree. And I said, well, why have you not got it then? Is there a technical issue? Because I could put you in touch with Janet. A bit patronising, isn't it? But anyway, I could put you in touch with some nice people and they could explain how you do it. And he went, no, I do it. There's no demand for it. Really? There's no demand. Nobody wants roaming. I said, well, I do. Now, I'm lucky. I work for one of the two core cities in Yorkshire and Humber. Not sure if there is another one other than Leeds. So I get to have a bigger voice. So that's fab for me. So I can go, no, I want it. Go make it happen, please. And they will listen to me, and that's fine. But I find it bizarre that nobody else has asked for it. And the other thing is, I mentioned about the rules that are guidance. It's a bit like Inception, a dream within a dream within a dream. So the rules that are guidance, that are rules that might be guidance that might change next week, are largely around PSN. So it shifts massively, and you actually need to employ experts who understand the current state of PSN compliance in order to make sure you're compliant. And if you're not, you're in big trouble. That's very, very different, I think, to what you've got for Janet, which is why I'm saying go hug Tim. Either of the Tims, in fact. Okay, some other things that are different, and I'm realising that I need to move on quite quickly. So, another picture. I like taking pictures. So this is something I call the Inca Pyramid. It's actually more correctly known as Morfoot. It's a huge building in the near centre of Sheffield. It used to be a civil service building. It is pretty ugly, brutal architecture, and it's hideous to find your way around it. It is awful. So some things that are different, language and culture. I was going to do a quick kind of poll to see if you could work out what those 3 acronyms were, but Alison had so much better acronyms than me, so I'm not going to. So CIRO, so I will become a CIRO shortly. Please have sympathy for me, and if you want to know what one is, I'll tell you, unless anybody knows. Oh, yeah, but what do they do? Ah, exactly. Right, what's an MER? Managed employee reduction? Yeah, nobody wants one of those. CIRO, yeah, MER, no. IPR? Pardon me? Nope, that's what I thought it meant. I was a bit surprised, but no. Individual performance review or appraisal. Yeah, so some things are different. The thing is, nobody explains these things to you. So you sit in a meeting going, a what? And then you ask someone, and they like look at you like you're stupid. Decision making, I've already talked about. We spend longer in some meetings working out what the decision making route is than we do making the decision, in my opinion. So, and this comes to this point. So this is the thing I don't like about my job. I absolutely adore my job, by the way. I love it. I don't like this. So by statute, there are certain people in local authorities that are classed as politically restricted officers. And the local authority can define which roles that is related to. So it's different in different authorities, which is interesting. If you are defined as a politically restricted officer, you're not allowed to do certain things. So I'm not allowed to canvass for a party, okay. I'm not allowed to stand for office, whether it's in my own authority or somewhere else. That's okay. I am not allowed to make any political statements here, on social media, in private to you over coffee, or at any other time. Which is really interesting. And one of the things I've thought about a lot is coming from a university environment where there's no shortage of opinion, is there really? You want an opinion, you'll get lots. Not always valid, but you will get lots of opinion. Can you imagine going from a culture where everybody has an entitlement to an opinion to suddenly a position where you have to be quite careful about what you say? I used to blog. When I worked at Hallam, I used to write a regular blog. It was very dull, but I did used to write one. And I wanted to do the same thing here because, you know, I actually think it's quite a useful way of people seeing what you do and what the role's about. And I'm so worried that I'll say something wrong that I don't. I daren't blog. And I've talked a lot to my boss about it. He thinks I'm probably over-worrying. But I'm also in a temporary post, so you can understand why I might be worrying. And that's the thing I hate. I hate the fact that it can actually curtail the kind of conversations you have. Maybe I am being unduly sensitive. It is only 7 months in. I might be being unduly sensitive about this one too, but in my induction pack, and along with the list of the many other things that I'm not allowed to do, no physical contact, no touching, so I can't hug anyone. So when I actually found a member of staff crying in my outer office, I actually did, and I'm really ashamed to admit this, I actually did think twice about, do I go give her a hug and check that she's okay? And I did actually think, if I do, and she raises a grievance, I am dead. But I went and gave her a hug. Because you would, wouldn't you? But that's one of the things you read in your induction pack. No touching. Not just don't start groping people, but no touching. Not that I would go around groping people. Because I knew that was wrong anyway. I got that in my induction at Hallam. Wayfinding. I think wayfinding, and the reason why I've put Morfoot on this, wayfinding was invented by someone who hates human beings. So that reference, that kind of looks a little bit like an IP address. I know it doesn't really, but it sort of does. That is a meeting room address in Morpho. So the first thing you have to learn is that you have to learn how to decode that. Okay? But nobody explains it to you. So it's kind of a bit like you have to go find your own Rosetta Stone, and then you have to try work out through the different languages which one it is. So the first two bits are quite easy. So 08, that's the floor. W is the wing. There are 4 wings in Morpho. It's a hideous building. 02 is much harder. That's the zone. Now, your floor's marked, plus the lifts take you there, some of the time. The wings are marked, but they're not all accessible from the same lifts, so you have to learn that as well. The zones are marked when you arrive at the zone. They're also colour-coded when you arrive at the zone. And then the last bit is easy, because that's the actual room number. So I usually allow half an hour to get from the town hall to my room that I'm meeting in Morpho, which is 15 minutes to stroll nicely, unless it's raining, stroll nicely down from the town hall to Morpho, and 15 minutes to run around like an idiot, trying to work out which zone I'm in and whether or not I can get to where I need to get to from a lift. The other thing you should note is, I said it's the Inca Pyramid, is the stepping. That means that if you're based on floor 8, the floor plan on floor 9 and floor 7, floor 4 is completely different because they're different sizes. So even if you know your way around one of the floors, you don't know your way around one of the other floors, and it's all open plan when you get there. So you step out of the lift, you step through into a zone, and there's loads of people sitting there working, and you have no idea who they are. And they're not necessarily always very friendly at giving you advice about where to go either, as I found out once. Okay, so on a personal level, HE, I found my job very pressured, very driven. There was an expectation I would be available 24/7. Didn't matter on holiday, didn't matter if I was overseas, just didn't matter. I had to be in contact. I was a named contact. Were our services really that critical? So the services that I was responsible for obviously affected the entire business operation. We had about 40,000 people that we were serving. So, yeah, a biggish organisation. Would anybody really have died, though? Am I allowed to ask that? There will be some of you who have institutions where you really do have really critical systems that could make a difference to someone's life. But for the rest of you, it's affecting your business. But surely it's not that critical, is it? In local government, it is very pressured, more pressured than HE, and people's lives definitely depend on some of our services. And yet, the expectation is you work really hard, but you have a life as well. So, bless you. So, it was a shock to me as well. My children are 20 and 17, and for the first time we went on holiday this last summer, and the first Christmas, and they both commented to me that they cannot recollect either a family holiday or a Christmas where I haven't had to either answer emails, answer texts, or deal with phone calls about work. I found that really depressing, the fact they cannot remember in their entire life a time. I only worked at Hallam for 14 years. They cannot actually recall a time when that wasn't normal, and now it's not. That's great. And yet our services are more critical. And decisions have a big impact. And Sheffield has around 550,000 residents. Sheffield City Region is even bigger, 1.2 million residents. So big numbers. Okay, so I know I'm over time. Is that all right? I had one job. So I was brought in to do 3 things. The list got added to before I even arrived. And it's increased and changed month on month. And I love that. I love the fact that for the last 5 weeks, my job is totally different from what it was 5 weeks before that. So for the last 5 weeks, I've spent all my time dealing with partnership management, and yet before that I was doing something different. And I love it because it's so varied. I spend most of my time working with external people rather than internal, which is interesting. So I work a lot with health. God, that's interesting. I work with a lot of partners. I work with a lot of our commercial partners. I work with city region public bodies. I do lots of joining up of things. I listen to people. I listen to what people are trying to achieve. They look to the council to kind of provide leadership and enablement in certain things. And then I take all the bits that I've heard and I try to join them together, and I try to knit something that gets us to where we need to be. I love the fact that I get the opportunity to do that. So the breadth of what I get involved in is massive. It's not just a CIO, so I can be sat in a meeting talking about for refuelling points for electrical cars. It's not really part of my remit. And I can be talking about BI, and then I can be talking about graffiti or some other stuff. I can just be talking about all kinds of revenues and benefits. This is something I didn't even know existed until I arrived at the council. You know, I knew I paid council tax, but I didn't know there was something in government called revenues and benefits. And I've had to stand and argue the case for revenues and benefits now, so I've learnt loads about them. The role's morphed. It's very different from what I expected, but there's huge opportunities for me to shape that. So it doesn't just happen to me. I actually get to control that. And the big thing is, actually, none of what I do, or very little of what I do, actually uses any of my IT background. It's all about relationships. It's all about building relationships with people who don't have to do what I ask them to do, listening to people, and then knitting things together, as I said. Some more pictures. These are bits of the town hall you wouldn't normally see. So there's a cupola, and it's on the ground floor, which means that the bit that it's covering is on the basement. I don't understand why it's got a cupola, and the cupola's on the inside of the building. So I just thought that was interesting. So I take lots of pictures, because I love the bits that you would never see. I love going and seeing that, like the ladies' toilets that have still got little ashtrays in the cubicles. I think brilliant. Okay, so what have I learned? There's no shortage of challenge. There are very many excellent, dedicated staff. Please do not believe the rhetoric that you hear. Public sector is an excellent environment, and there are fantastic people in it. But we need more. We need people who are talented, who deliver, who are creative, who are innovative, to see the public sector as a viable career option, not something that people who failed go and do. Although you might believe that's true. And there's plenty of scope to expand what you do, if you're willing to do that. And you have to deliver, obviously, otherwise what's the point? So, you may be thinking, that sounds really good. I'd like to do that. Yeah? No? Yeah? I'd like you to. So should you consider moving to local government? I'd like you all to get up and go look for those jobs right now. So if you thrive on high-pressured environments where there's loads of challenge, I know it reads a bit like a job description, doesn't it? And working pragmatically across domains and boundaries. If you can do that and you like doing that, yes, this is the kind of environment for you, because you can make a difference there. If you like it simple, stable, working within your own domain, don't get pushed too much, don't bother. Because it is the most ambiguous environment I have ever worked in. And that's brilliant, because the ambiguity gives you the opportunities to be creative. But if that's not for you, then it's not for you. If you want to make a difference to people's lives genuinely, not just, you know, like a Miss World contestant, you want to make a difference to people's lives and well-being, yes, it is fantastic. You can have huge influence. And in my case, on 500,000 people. That's actually quite scary, particularly as I don't live in Sheffield. Sorry, Chris. Because you do, and I'm affecting you. Sorry about that. Chris moans at me now about tram gates and parking tickets. Nothing to do with me, but she likes moaning to me about it because everybody hates their local authority. If you're motivated by prestige, by public recognition, or money, don't bother. Everybody hates you, nobody recognises what you do, and the pay's crap. But, other than that, it's great. So, local government and the public sector generally needs innovative, talented people to join. Not to replace the people who are already there, they're very good, but we need more new blood. We need people like you. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, that was fab. I'm sure there are loads of questions.
Or possibly not. Can't see with the lights. Come on, somebody. Yep. Hello, Emma.
Hey, Aline, it's Emma Jeffrey from Sheffield Hallam, so Amy was my boss in the past. I've done the opposite to you. I've gone from local authority to the HE sector. And I wondered, your last comment there, like a recruitment drive to, innovative people. Do you really feel that the local authority sector would really welcome innovative people?
I think it differs, if I'm being really brutally honest. I think it differs from authority to authority. So one of the things that I get a lot of feedback about me is the thing they like about me is I'm weird, I'm different. And people actually do say things like, we like you because you're different. And it's like, how am I different? And they just say, because you're not like we are. So, you know, you challenge things, you ask questions, you say, why do you not have roaming? Why don't you allow people to use Wi-Fi? And so I think there are organisations that are very welcoming of that, and I'm lucky that I'm working in one. I think the other thing is that austerity and the way that we've had to change working practices in local government means that people can't really afford not to welcome innovative, talented people. We need more of it because it's actually getting harder now to take the money out, and we're not seeing any sign that they're suddenly going to start injecting money into local government. So assuming that it's going to continue to be money taken away, although at the moment there is an end point, they can't carry on taking the money. The only way we'll get to future savings is by people having quite a radical rethink of what we do. And really the only way you can easily do that is to get some people into the mix who say, well, why do you do that?